the concrete curb dug into my thighs, the rough stone biting through my thin jeans. 2 black garbage bags rested against my knees, stuffed with whatever I could grab in 10 frantic minutes. The metallic scrape of a power drill echoed from the front porch behind me, cutting through the quiet hum of the affluent suburban street. My father stood on the immaculate brick steps of his Charlotte estate, his arms crossed tightly over his ironed golf shirt. He directed the locksmith with a sharp point of his finger. Not even looking in my direction, the old brass deadbolt tumbled into the worker's palm with a heavy clink. My father handed the man a folded bill, stepped inside the grand foyer, and locked the brand new door before I even stood up from the curb. I was 20 years old, completely broke, and carrying a child he had just called a permanent, disgusting stain on our family name. He did not yell. He did not throw a fit or break plates. He just erased me from his life with the same clinical, terrifying precision he used to prune his prize-winning rose bushes. The heavy wooden door clicking shut was the loudest sound I had ever heard. 5 years passed. Those years were not a beautiful, cinematic montage of inspiring personal growth. They were a grinding, suffocating, endless cycle of basic survival. I traded the manicured lawns and quiet security of my father's neighborhood for a cramped studio apartment right off Interstate 85, where the air constantly smelled of diesel exhaust and damp mildew. I scrubbed aggressive black mold off the bathroom tiles every Sunday afternoon with bleach that burned my lungs, knowing full well the dark spots would creep back up the wall by Thursday. I worked brutal double shifts at a neon-lit diner, biting the inside of my cheek until it bled while truck drivers and businessmen left $2 tips on $30 tabs. On the nights I could not afford both a decent dinner and Paige's expensive asthma medication, I drank 2 glasses of tap water and went to sleep with a hollow, aching claw in my stomach. Everything I did, every ounce of pride I swallowed, was to keep my daughter breathing and fed, 20 minutes away. My father, Derek, lived his pristine, untethered life. He drove a brand new luxury sedan, played 18 holes at the country club every Saturday morning, and told his wealthy friends that I had run off to Las Vegas on a massive drug bender. It was a neat, tragic, perfectly crafted lie that painted him as the grieving, noble victim rather than a ruthless tyrant who locked his pregnant daughter out in the cold. My younger brother, Spencer, was a teenager trapped under my father's roof, suffocating under the weight of his impossible expectations. Spencer would sometimes sneak out to meet me at a local park, slipping me $40 in a paper coffee cup. His eyes were always wide with absolute terror that our father would catch him and instantly cut his college tuition funding. We whispered like criminals in the daylight, 2 siblings terrified of the man who was supposed to protect us. Everything shifted on a rainy Tuesday in October. Garrett walked into the diner, shaking the cold water from his expensive wool coat. He was a quiet, unassuming man I had met briefly during a chaotic college orientation weekend years ago, long before the nightmare started. He had spent years searching for me after realizing through a mutual acquaintance that we had a daughter together. Garrett brought no dramatic speeches, no demands, and no chaos. He brought quiet, unwavering stability and an unbelievable amount of generational wealth. He did not try to buy my affection or forcefully take Paige away to play house. Instead, he hired a prestigious corporate law firm and set up a $2,500,000 irrevocable trust for Paige, locked down tighter than a Federal Reserve vault. He added a separate $500,000 escrow account strictly designated for our immediate housing, education, and medical needs. In a city like Charlotte, money makes an incredibly loud noise. The neighborhood gossip vine carried the news of the foreign wealth straight back to my father's gated community. Suddenly, the deadbeat, drug-addicted daughter was directly connected to millions of dollars, and just like that, my father's 5-year silence abruptly ended. The Grand Redemption Tour began with a cheap grocery store bouquet of flowers left on the welcome mat of my new, secure townhouse. Then came the endless voicemails. His voice was thick with practiced emotion, trembling in all the right places, begging for a second chance to be a real grandfather to the little girl he had completely ignored for half a decade. I did not want to let him in. Every single survival instinct I had built over 5 brutal years screamed at me to bolt the heavy door and block his number entirely. But a tiny, starved part of my heart, the part that still wanted a dad, wondered if losing me had actually broken his massive ego. Against my better judgment, I agreed to supervise visits at a highly secure, neutral family center downtown. The rules were humiliatingly strict, designed specifically to protect Paige. He could not bring gifts. He could not promise future trips. He could not ask Paige to keep any secrets. He was granted exactly 30 minutes, twice a month, heavily monitored by a trained social worker sitting in the corner of the room. My father complied flawlessly. He arrived 10 minutes early to every single session. He sat at the tiny, brightly colored plastic table and colored pictures with Paige, shedding exactly one perfect, glistening tear when she handed him a crayon drawing of a purple butterfly. I let my guard down. I thought I was witnessing a profound human miracle. I had absolutely no idea I was watching a meticulous audit. Toxic people like my father do not bond with children. They calculate assets, every warm smile, every colored butterfly. Every single minute logged on the sign-in sheet at that family center was not an act of grandfatherly love. It was a calculated deposit into a legal ledger. He was meticulously manufacturing a documented, undeniable history of a loving, established relationship. He was building the exact weapon he needed to financially destroy me. And I was holding the front door wide open for him to do it. 6 months passed in relative peace, believing the nightmare was finally behind me. I enrolled in a full-time accounting program at the State University. I was finally building a solid, respectable future for myself. I felt truly safe for the first time in my adult life. The trap snapped shut on a regular Wednesday afternoon. A grim-faced process server stepped out from behind a parked SUV outside my apartment building and shoved a thick, heavy manila envelope into my chest. I tore it open right there on the concrete sidewalk. The dense legal jargon blurred together, but the terrifying reality hit me like a physical blow to the ribs. My father had filed a massive, aggressive lawsuit in family court. He was officially petitioning for mandatory grandparent visitation rights. But that was only the bait. The real hook was buried deep on page 4 of the document. He had filed an emergency motion to be legally appointed as the financial conservator over Paige's entire trust fund. His justification was a breathtaking masterpiece of character assassination. His expensive, silver-haired attorney had drafted a narrative claiming my history of extreme poverty and my lack of a completed college degree made me totally financially illiterate and highly susceptible to fraud. He argued that the sudden influx of Garrett's wealth had made me erratic, unstable, and entirely unfit to manage a child's future. He pointed directly to the logs from the supervised visits as ironclad. Undeniable proof of his deep, stabilizing, essential bond with his granddaughter. Then came the ultimate demand: a court-ordered $15,000 monthly maintenance and housing allowance, paid directly from the trust into his personal accounts, to ensure Paige was raised in his stable. high-income environment. He did not want my child. He wanted the $15,000 a month. He had manipulated my mercy to forge his evidence. I froze on the sidewalk, the heavy papers shaking in my hands. But I did not panic, and I did not call him to scream. The girl crying on the curb 5 years ago was dead. I called Margot, my ruthless family law attorney, and we immediately went to work. Spencer was now 25. And during his grueling final year of law school, his entire professional future hinged entirely on my father paying that final massive tuition bill. My father held that financial leash incredibly tight, assuming Spencer would never bite the hand that fed him. Assuming the boy was too weak to ever rebel, he severely underestimated my brother. Exactly a week before the hearing, Spencer walked into Margot's downtown office. He looked pale, exhausted, terrified, and incredibly brave. He placed his physical smartphone flat on the heavy mahogany conference table. He had decided to burn his own safety net to the ground to protect us. Margot's law firm instantly fronted the exorbitant cost of a certified Cellebrite forensic data extraction. They pulled a pristine, legally bulletproof, time-stamped copy of every single text message on that device and legally subpoenaed the carrier metadata to back it up perfectly. There would be no questioning the authenticity of the evidence. The courtroom smelled intensely of industrial floor wax and old, polished wood. My father sat confidently at the petitioner's table in his tailored gray suit, his hands folded neatly, looking exactly like a tragic, deeply wronged patriarch. His silver-haired lawyer stood up and spent 20 minutes painting a devastating, highly emotional picture of a newly wealthy, erratic mother cruelly keeping a loving, reformed grandfather away from his only precious grandchild. Margot stood up. She did not raise her voice. She did not argue the emotional manipulation. She simply dropped the receipts. First, she entered the intake form from the downtown homeless shelter I stayed in 5 years ago. She pointed a manicured finger to the box clearly checked abandoned youth. Signed and officially dated during the exact period my father claimed to the court he was desperately searching the city for me. Then, she introduced Spencer's forensic text dump into evidence. The silence in the courtroom grew so heavy and tight it felt suffocating. Margot read my father's own written words aloud, her calm voice ringing sharply off the wood-paneled walls. The supervised visits are just a box to check. Just play the game. Once the bond is firmly established on paper, we file the injunction for the monthly allowance. Follow the money. She is too stupid and too emotional to see it coming. My father's face lost every drop of color. He looked like a man who had confidently stepped off a high cliff and was suddenly waiting to hit the rocky ground. He turned his head slowly to look at Spencer, who was sitting quietly in the back gallery. And the horrific realization finally hit him. His perfect, flawless paper trail had just become his legal execution. His silver-haired lawyer stopped taking notes. The attorney stared blindly at the forensic report, read the carrier metadata, and then glared at my father. To protect his own prestigious law license from the catastrophic fallout of knowingly filing a fraudulent claim, the lawyer snapped his leather briefcase shut, stood straight up, and formally requested to withdraw his counsel on the spot. He walked quickly out of the swinging wooden doors, leaving my father sitting entirely alone in the echoing room. The judge did not just dismiss the case. She glared down from the high bench with absolute, undisguised disgust. She slammed my father with severe Rule 11 sanctions for deliberately filing a malicious, frivolous lawsuit intended entirely to extort a minor's protected trust. She ordered him to pay my entire legal bill out of his own pocket. $85,000, payable in full in 30 days. The fallout was swift, brutal, and entirely irreversible. Family court sanctions of that magnitude instantly become public record. The story of his extortion attempt bled into his precious elite country club circles like dark ink through a wet white napkin. His pristiny, carefully cultivated reputation was incinerated overnight. He became a total social pariah in the only world he actually cared about. To cover the crushing $85,000 court penalty and the exorbitant immediate exit fees his own lawyer demanded, my father completely ran out of liquid cash. 3 weeks later, a tasteful real estate sign went up in his perfectly manicured front yard. He was forced to quietly list and sell the immaculate brick estate to avoid bankruptcy. He lost the exact same house where he had changed the locks on me 5 years ago. Spencer secured a massive private student loan to finish his final semester. He was staring down a daunting mountain of debt. But for the first time in his entire life, he was completely, beautifully free from the leash. We sat together at my small kitchen table that night, eating cheap takeout with Garrett while Paige slept soundly upstairs. I opened my laptop, highlighted the massive digital folder of legal defense files, and hit delete. The fortress was finally secure. Let me tell you the absolute hardest truth about surviving someone who shares your exact blood. The judge sentenced him to total ruin, not by locking him inside a concrete jail cell, but by systematically stripping away the only two things he ever truly loved in this world: his money and his public image. The restitution of $85,000 gutted his retirement savings, but the sheer social exile is what destroyed his soul. The fallout was spectacular and absolute. The men at the country club stopped returning his phone calls. The neighbors stopped waving from their driveways. The entire community he had spent decades meticulously trying to impress now looked at him like he was a walking contagion. He had nothing left to leverage. A few months later, the hollow echo arrived. It was a single voicemail left on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. His voice sounded thin, reedy, stripped completely of its usual booming, arrogant authority. He talked endlessly about how much he missed the family dinners. He mentioned my deceased mother, trying to use her memory as an emotional shield. He said he filed the lawsuit only because he was worried about my financial future, claiming his horrific actions were just the clumsy, misunderstood mistakes of an overprotective parent. It was the final, pathetic manipulation attempt. The classic, predictable pivot from a ruthless tyrant to a weeping victim. I listened to the entire message while standing perfectly still at my kitchen sink. My pulse did not race. My hands did not shake. My vision did not blur with tears. I just pressed the delete button on the screen and went right back to washing the dishes. I did not call him back to scream. I did not send a fiery, highly emotional text message demanding an apology. Absolute indifference is the ultimate, untouchable weapon against a narcissist. Silence is a massive brick boundary they simply cannot cross. My life now is remarkably quiet. The constant, buzzing chaos is completely gone. I have a chosen family now. Garrett, who treats our co-parenting dynamic as a respectful, equal partnership rather than a bitter battleground. Spencer, who proved his absolute character when it mattered most, choosing what was right over what was easy. And friends who do not demand a piece of my soul in exchange for their basic loyalty. Peace is not just the absence of fighting. Peace is waking up every single morning and knowing deep in your bones that the ground beneath your feet is not going to suddenly vanish just because someone changed their mind about loving you. If you are watching this and you are standing exactly where I stood 5 years ago, staring at a locked door, holding garbage bags, wondering what you did wrong to deserve such cruelty, I need you to listen to me very carefully. I am Brooke, and I am completely free. And you can be free too, but you have to learn the cold, hard rules of the game they are forcing you to play. Rule number 1, beware the apology Trojan horse. When a toxic person suddenly shifts their behavior, especially when money, power, or independence is suddenly involved, it is almost never a genuine apology. It is reconnaissance. They are looking for the cracks in your armor. They want to see if your boundaries have softened enough to let them sneak back in. Never accept sudden compliance at face value. A wolf wearing a sweater is still a wolf. Rule number 2, mercy is a massive liability without an ironclad paper trail. If you ever have to engage with an abuser, do it strictly in writing. Do it through lawyers. Do it under highly supervised, institutionalized conditions. The truth does not win in a courtroom. Evidence wins in a courtroom. If I had simply let him visit his granddaughter on weekends without the structured, supervised center logging every single minute, he would have easily convinced a judge that he was her primary emotional caregiver. Keeping the receipts is not petty. It is the very foundation of your physical and emotional survival. Rule number 3, blood is nothing more than biology. Loyalty is what actually makes a family. My father shared my DNA, but he looked at my child and saw a monthly paycheck. My brother shared my DNA, and he looked at his own professional future and decided to risk it all to protect us from a predator. You are absolutely allowed to walk away from people who hurt you, even if you share a last name. Trust is a heavy currency that must be earned over time. Not a tax you blindly owe someone just because they raised you. Have you ever accepted an apology that turned out to be a massive trap? How did you finally build a wall they could not climb over? Share your story in the comments below. Let us remind each other that choosing yourself is not selfish. It is the bravest thing you will ever do. Keep your boundaries high. Keep your receipts organized. And never let anyone make you feel bad for surviving. I know exactly what you are screaming at the screen right now. You are sitting there yelling. Why did she even let that man back into her life? Why give him supervised visits after he locked her out on the curb to freeze? It feels completely crazy to watch her open that door. Right. Let us talk about the psychology of toxic families. Because Brooke was not being stupid or weak. She was caught in something psychologists call the slot machine effect, or intermittent reinforcement. When someone starves you of love, safety, and validation for 5 years, and then suddenly drops a tiny crumb of affection like a cheap bouquet of grocery store flowers or a perfectly timed tear, your brain hits the jackpot. You get addicted to the hope that this time they have finally changed. Toxic manipulators rely on this. They know exactly how to play the slot machine of your emotions, letting you win just enough to keep you sitting at the table while they quietly empty your pockets. But here is where this story flips from a tragedy into an absolute masterclass in financial self-defense. Brooke survived because she stopped playing the slot machine and executed 3 brilliant street-smart strategies. First, building the case. Brooke did not rely on her feelings or her memory to fight her father. She relied on institutional facts. That abandoned youth shelter form from 5 years ago was her ultimate receipt. Second, the audit strategy. When she finally allowed him access, she did not just meet him at a park. She forced him into a highly monitored, documented environment. Scammers, extortionists, and manipulators absolutely hate a paper trail. By forcing him into a neutral family center, she turned his own reconnaissance mission into a monitored trap. She let his perfect compliance become the very rope he hung his own case with. Third, the buyout. When you are dealing with a predator who is playing the long game to follow the money, you have to out-leverage them legally and structurally. By securing an irrevocable trust with a corporate trustee, she made the $2,500,000 completely untouchable to a conservatorship. And when she dropped that certified forensic text extraction in court, she did not just win a custody argument, she triggered Rule 11 sanctions. She used the legal system to hit his wallet, forcing her abuser to buy out of her life to the tune of $85,000, while simultaneously incinerating his country club reputation. The ultimate lesson here is that you cannot outlove a person who views you as a financial asset, but you can outdocument them. Your peace of mind is worth protecting with boundaries of steel and a paper trail a mile long. If you have ever had to build a legal fortress to protect yourself from the people who were supposed to love you most, share your survival story in the comments below. Subscribe and hit the bell for more deep dives into the psychology of survival. And remember to always keep your receipts.